Hi, welcome to my video on solve trig equations, quadratics number 6. And this one pertains to the ratios of tan, cot, secant, and cosecant. Recall, tan is sine over cosine. Cot is the reciprocal, so it's cosine theta over sine theta. Secant is the reciprocal of S. I need a C, so it's cos. Cosecant is a C, so it's the reciprocal of sine. And how I learn it, C is S, S is C. It's a simple way. Remember, tan is opposite over adjacent, and opposite is sine, adjacent is cos. That's how I remember that. So let's use these ratios to solve quadratic trig equations. Solve for theta. 0 is less than theta, less than 0 is less than or equal to theta, less than 360. We're solving in degrees, and notice we're not allowed to have 360. So cot is cos squared theta over sine squared theta. That's sine squared theta. Secant is 1 over cos theta plus 1 and 2 cos squared theta. So I changed cot to cos over sine. I changed secant to 1 over cos. And as a result, because these are multiplications, I can cancel. So the sine squared cancels, and cos cancels into cos squared cos. So I have a cos theta plus 1 equals 2 cos squared theta. And bring all terms to the left side. So make 2 cos squared theta negative plus cos theta plus 1 equals 0. I'm moving it in descending order, cos squared cos and a constant. Now I'll multiply by negative 1, so 2 cos squared theta minus cos theta minus 1 equals 0. And now I'm able to notice there's no GCF, but it's a quadratic, so it's factorable. And this is the easy one to factor, because cos squared is cos times cos, but 2 is 2 times 1. And the product on the end is a negative, and it's a 1. I have a 1 here, so the only way to get that 1 is 1 times 1. So the product is A times C, which is negative 2, and the sum is negative 1. Since the product is negative, one of these got to be positive, and one of them got to be negative. So if it's a negative here, so I'm going to get negative 1, positive 1. So outside is negative 2. Inside is positive 1. That adds up to give me negative 1, so that's the correct factoring. And each of these are equal to 0 because I have a quadratic. I have 2 possible sets of answers. And there they are. Each one of these factors are equal to 0. And 2 cos theta equals negative 1. Divide by 2. And cos theta equals negative a half. And here cos theta equals 1. Now we have cos theta is a half, and cos add sugar to coffee. Cos is the x, so cos or x. Cos is positive in 1 and these are the positive trig ratio, positive in 1 and 4 and negative in 2 and 3. So we'll draw this one in 2. And we'll draw it again in 3. So in quadrant 2, terminal arm perpendicular to the x-axis. Third quadrant, terminal arm perpendicular to the x-axis. And cos is the x, so the x is a negative a half. and the x is the negative a half in each quadrant. Hypotenuse is 1, and this side is root 3 over 2 positive, and this side is root 3 over 2 negative. Y is positive going up, negative going down, and no matter what, opposite root 3 over 2 is a 60-degree angle, and opposite the half is 30. And right here, opposite root 3 over 2 is a 60, and the other angle is 30, 30, 60, 90. So that means my reference angle is equal to 60. And so in quadrant 3, it's theta is 180 minus the reference of 60, so it's 120 degrees. And in quadrant 2, 180 minus 60. Quadrant 3 is 180 plus the reference of 60, so it's a 240. And cos, if we think about this circle, unit circle, 1, 0, 0, 1, negative 1, 0, and 0, negative 1. Cos is 1, cos is the x at theta is 0 degrees. We're allowed to use 0. We're not allowed to have 360. So 0. And so now we have all, got to be careful. I got to be careful here. Because we have reciprocal ratios, notice I have a cot and a secant. So that means I have sine is on the bottom here. So that means sine theta cannot be 0. And that means that cos theta cannot be 0. Because if sine is 0, 0 is on the bottom, and it's undefined. If cos is theta is equal to 0, that means it's undefined on the bottom. So that means if sine cannot be 0, that means sine is 0 at 0 degrees and at 180 degrees. So that means theta cannot be 0 or 180, because 0 and 180 for sine will give me a 0, make it undefined. And cos is equal to 0 at 90 and 270. And that means if cos can't be 0, that means theta can't be 90 or 270, because the cos of 90 is 0, and that makes secant undefined. And do any of these answers? I can't have 0, 180, 90, 270. None of these answers are that, so I can have 0, 120, and I can have 240s. You got to be careful with ratios that have denominators, because your denominators can't be 0. So always check that before you can do that before you start, or you can get the answers to see if the answers fit your choice. Now we have another one to solve. Solve for theta, but this time 0 is less than or equal to theta, less than 2 pi. So that means 2 pi, we have to look at radians. So the answer's got to be in terms of radians. So what do? I work out the answers in terms of degrees, and then when I'm finished, I change my degrees to radians. That's the best way I find to do. Now we have tan is sine theta over cos theta. Secant is 1 over cos theta. And we have cos. So I change tan to sine over cos, secant to 1 over cos. And notice, before we start here, notice that cos theta cannot be 0. Because if cos is 0, tan is undefined, and secant is undefined. So that means theta, cos is 0 at 90 and 270. Again, if you think about the circle, this is a very valuable, it's extremely important to have this at your disposal. So cos is the x is 0 at the 90, 270. So you cannot have a 90 degree or 270, because I'll make this equation undefined. Now, let's continue solving this. Notice the LCD. The LCD for the these two fractions is cos theta. So that means I'm going to multiply all parts of the equation by cos theta. So cos theta times sine theta over cos theta plus cos theta times 1 over cos theta and cos theta times cos theta. So I multiplied cos theta by each of these fractions right here. Because I write it down, because I'm showing you, notice the cos cancels out, so I get a sine theta, and cos cancels out, and I get a 1, and that gives me cos squared theta. Now you notice that we have a sine and a cos in the same problem, but I can't factor, so we have to make them the same. So we also learned that cos squared plus sine squared is equal to 1. So that means that cos squared is 1 subtract sine squared. We did that in identities earlier on in Trig that you should have practiced before we did equations. So therefore, if I change the cos squared to 1 minus sine squared, that means I have the same trig ratios in the equation. Notice also I have a 1 here and a 1 here, so I can cancel the 1s because they're on each side. So bring the sine over, sine squared, make it positive, plus sine theta equals 0. So move the negative sine theta to the left and make it positive. Now you notice you have a quadratic that's factorable. Sine is the GCF, so sine squared divided by sine is sine. Sine divided by sine is plus 1. We have two factors. We let each factor equal to 0. So sine theta. So this one is already done. Let's solve this one. So sine theta is equal to negative 1. And we have this circle that I wrote down. Again, remember when you're doing trig, if you write this circle down on a sheet of paper at the beginning, you wouldn't have to keep writing it down and for each question, saves you time. Sine is the y is 0. Sine is the y, so y is 0 at 0 degrees. And sine is 0 at 180 degrees. And we can't go 360 because 360, we're not allowed to have 2 pi. 2 pi is 360. Sine is negative 1. The y is negative 1 at, so right here we got a 270. Now we have them all done. Do we have, right here we have a 90 and a 270. So we can't use 270 because it makes it undefined. So we can't use 270. So the answer in degrees is 0 and 180. But we got to have the answer as a radian. So 0 degrees is 0 radians, and 180 degrees is the same as pi. And so in terms of radians, this equation works when theta is 0 or pi in terms of radian. And again, always check when your denominator can't be 0, and that's to find those values of the angles that you can't use. Always check. And let's solve another one. 0 is less than or equal to theta, less than or equal to 360. Notice this time we have degrees, but this time, because I restricted the domain further, we can have a 0 because it's equal to 0, and we can have a 360 now, because I said it's equal to 0 and equal to 360. So you have to obey that this is in degrees, and we're allowed to have a 0 and a 360. Whereas before, if I bring the page back, bring the first page back, we said 0 is less than or equal to theta, less than 360. I can't have a 360 in this question. So be careful of the restricted domain. Okay, let's continue. Let's see, we have sine theta minus 4 3 sine theta. And notice we have -2, so that's a -2 times cosecant, so that's a -2. Cosecant is 1 over sine theta, so that's a -2 over 1, so that gives me -2 over sine theta, because it's 2 times 1 over sine, and you get -2 over sine. And again, notice that sine theta cannot be 0. That means that theta cannot be, and again, let's draw this circle. I always draw it to make sure I can, because when I have it in front of me, then I hopefully won't make an error. Sometimes I do. Sine is the y. Where's y? 0. And we got a 0. And we got a 180. But also, this time, we're not allowed to have what? 360, because 0 is 360 and 180. So sine is the y at 0, 180, and 360. That's possible. I can't have those. So we have two fractions equal. Let's solve the equation. We cross multiply. Sine times sine theta times sine theta minus 4 equals -2 times 3 sine theta. So two fractions equal, and cross multiplying. Use the x. So that gives me sine squared theta minus 4 sine theta. -2 times 3 is -6 sine theta. And so that gives me sine squared theta minus 4 sine theta plus 6 sine theta equals 0. So I have a quadratic, and notice, so I move all terms to the left side equal to 0. And we keep simplifying. So sine theta and -4 plus 6, they're like terms because they're both can be added. That's plus 2 sine theta equals 0. And sine is a common factor, so we factor it out. Sine squared divided by sine is sine. 2 sine divided by sine is plus 2. And we get two sets of factors. Sine theta equals 0, or sine theta plus 2 equals 0. And finish solving this one. Sine theta equals -2. So let's deal with this one. We could deal with this one. Doesn't make any difference. Okay, let's deal with this one. Sine is the y, and the y is 0 at, the y is 0 at 0 and at 180. And we're allowed to use 360. And sine is -2. So theta is no solution, because what happens is that if you do theta equals sine to the -1 up to -2 on the calculator, you get an error. And also another reason is that -1 is less than or equal to sine theta is less than or equal to 1. The maximum value for sine is 1, the minimum value is -1, so they're always in between, so you can't have a -2. And besides that, if you think about the graph, I have the sine graph memorized. It starts at 0, goes up to 1, back to 0, back to -1, back to 0. So the sine graph is a sideways S. And that's a 1, and that's a -1. If you think we're going around here, sine is the y. So the y at 0 is 0, the y at 90 is 1, the y at 180 is 0. So that's a 90, 180, this is a 270, and this is the 360. There's a 0 there. So sine graph is a sideways S, so there's no solutions, can't be -2. So we check the values. The sine cannot be 0, 180, 360, and that's what these are. So that means the solution to this problem there's no solution. Even though I solved it and worked it out to be sine to be these, but remember, sine cannot have 0. So if you do the sine of 0, you get a 0 in the bottom, and it's undefined. So both of these got sine in the bottom, so it makes no difference. One of them is undefined, and it can't work. So because these three answers are these that we can't use any of these, we can't use these, so there's no solution to this problem. Can't work. Again, check out those what we call extraneous roots, the roots that can't work in the equation. And when you have fractions, your denominator can't be 0. Now, let's solve this one. Solve for theta. 90 is less than or equal to theta less than 270. So you notice that this domain is now, that means you're only on a circle like this. You're only looking for the degrees that's between 90 and 270. You're only looking for the answers that fit in here. So when you get the answers, you got to check it out, and if any of the answers comes out between 90 and 270, you can use. If any of the answers are not between 90 and 270, you can't use them. So here we go. Let's solve sine theta. Cot is cos theta over sine theta. Cos theta. Secant is 1 over cos. And cos. So I have them all changed. And what I'm looking at that now is just about to look for, keep it straight. Notice that sine theta can't be equal to 0 because it's undefined. That means that, again, in terms of a circle, 1, 0, 0, 1. Takes a second to write it down, but again, if I were doing a quiz or something, I would have it down on a sheet of paper. Sine is the y is 0 at 0 and 180. 360 we don't have to use, and it says that cos theta cannot be equal to 0. Cos is 0 at the 90 right here and at 270, but we can't have those, so I can't have these angles because it makes this undefined. So let's continue. Sine cancels, so that gives us cos times cos is cos squared. Cos's cancel, I get a -2 equals -1. Continue, I get cos squared theta equals -1 plus 2. Cos squared theta equals 1. Now, there's two ways to solve this, and I'll just, for a second, work it out the two different ways. One way is that I could work it out by bringing the 1 over, make it negative, and then I could factor the difference of two squares. So notice this is cos theta times cos theta. 1 is 1 times 1 with a plus minus. So that means cos theta plus 1 equals 0, or cos theta minus 1 equals 0. So cos theta equals -1, cos theta equals 1. Move them over, plus makes a minus, and minus makes a plus. And the other way, while I'm at it, is to let it stay like that and do the square root. Square root of cos squared theta equals plus minus the root of 1. So cos theta is plus minus 1. So now I have cos theta equals 1, or cos theta equals -1, same as I have down here. So you could solve that either of two ways. And because we're looking at cos as the x is -1, that's at 180. And cos theta equals 1, that's at, right here, that's at 0. And we could have 360, but 360 is not here. So, what answer fits? Well, Notice we can't have 180, even though the answer worked out to be 180 here and the answer here worked out to be 0. 0 can't fit because it's not in this, so we can't use 0. Again, 0 does not. 90 less than or equal to theta less than 270. 0 is not here, so we can't. No solution. It's not fitting it. And 180 makes sine 0. The sine of 180 is 0, and sine is in the bottom, so we can't use 180 because it's no solution. So the answer for theta here, there's no solution to this problem. No solution, no solution. 180 can't work because it makes it undefined. Right here, sine of 180 is 0, and 0 on the bottom is undefined. So we can't have a 0 because it doesn't fit in the domain. We can't have 180 because it makes the denominator 0, so there's no solution to this problem. Always check out the fractions which have a denominator, and that denominator cannot be 0. So that brings us to the end of this video on doing the ratios which have fractions making the denominator 0. So we always simplify sine, cos, tan, secant, cosecant. Sorry, we always simplify tan, cot, secant, and cosecant to cos and sine, and then working out the equations further when we want to solve them. And if you like my video, click the like button, click the subscribe button, visit my math website, www.mathfullyexplained.com, to find more information about me, my videos, and the content. That's the content on my YouTube channel called Math Fully Explained. Thank you for viewing my video. Bye-bye.